Sightings. Thanks for joining me. Fred in Alaska, of course. So this comes from Susanna. She is she's from the South Central area of Alaska, at the Alaskan and Heritage. And what she shared with us is disturbing because it's ongoing. I've been invited to check it out. I got to touch base with Squatch Bait and some other things and see how doable that is. But anyway, so to be more specific, this is down on the Kenai Peninsula. And so Susanna has been dealing with this being basically stalking her and watching her. So it all started about 3 years ago. She had been in this place. She inherited from a family member, and it wasn't like a full-on inheritance. She had to pick up payments, basically, right? So anyway, so she's doing her thing. She's living life. She has to do a little commute thing because she works in nursing and whatnot. And, well, her schedule around COVID and stuff was really jacked up. She was going for all hours, would get, a few hours off and whatever. So, she was strained and stressed out. And, she expressed to me that she felt very vulnerable during this time period where all this started ramping up, right? Which, if we look at how things seem to be with these creatures, they seem to really thrive on vulnerability, whether no matter how it plays out, it seems like they're opportunistic in that way. Although that's anecdotal, no one's an expert. Anyway, so she gets back from her shift, right? She did a 16 and she's tired, you know what I mean? But she still has to unwind. So she gets inside and, it may sound strange, but she brewed some coffee to sip coffee and actually relax and just let her mind go and decompress. So as Susanna's sitting there, her drapes were open, and this was in the springtime. Most of the snow was off the ground, but none of the leaves had sprouted yet, right? And it's getting lighter that time of year, and it just so happened when she got off work, it was in the morning, and it was light enough outside where she could see out, to the tree line by where this property is. And as she's sitting there, she started feeling really weird and was trying to figure out, why do I feel like I'm being watched? And she starts looking around and is like, this is weird. And movement catches her eye straight out the window, straight back into the tree line. She said she wasn't good with distances, but it's a good little distance to the tree line back behind her house, right? And so she's trying to figure out what this dark spot is back in the brush, because she'd been there for a while. She knows her yard, so something's out of place. She picked up on it immediately, and she's trying to figure it out, and she just couldn't. So she was like, well, let me get my glasses. They basically reading glasses. She has slight vision thing, but nothing like she needs bifocals or, some Coke bottle glasses. But, with being tired and stuff, so she looks around, finds it on her stand. She puts on her glasses to get a better look, and that dark spot is gone. And she was like, all right, that's weird. Whatever. I'm tired. She chalked it up. I'm overworked. I'm tired. I got all the stress of this, this vid stuff going on at the hospital and all these different guidelines. So I'm just, obviously I'm under stress. So she left it alone. And she goes to bed. She fell asleep in her nice big recliner. And she had the TV going in the background just barely. So it was basically sound of the TV, she just falls asleep. All her curtains were closed except that one window straight in front of her, and the curtains were open maybe a couple feet. And as she's sitting there sleeping, she starts hearing this weird thump. It's like the window tap, like that. She said the cadence was about 2 to 3 at a time, and it slowly took her out of her sleep. She didn't check the time at that point, but she was like, what the hell, She thought maybe a neighbor was trying to knock on the door or something, so she didn't even look at the window. She just got up and went to her side door that has a window in it, and looks at it, and there's no one. It's middle of the day. There's no one around. She could see her neighbor's house off in the distance. She's like, well, no one's here. So she goes over to the actual main door that you have to come around the side of the garage to get to. And nothing there. It has the same style window. Kind of like a quasi glass stain, but artificial. It wasn't full on glass stain. It kind of had some frosted glass and different pattern on it, right? So nothing there either. So she goes back, and just as she turns and sits back down into her chair, she hears that tap again, right? And immediately she's more awake now, and she looks directly ahead. Now remember, this curtain open a couple feet, and she notices it's black outside of that window. Just that window, it's black outside. It's, you know, there, of course, there's like light still coming in, but whatever's directly in front of that window is blacking it out as far as her vision, what she could see. She's like, what the hell? So she's kind of confused. She knows it's daylight outside, you know, she knows she hasn't, you know, like lost her mind. So she walks over to the window, kind of opens the curtains some more, and then she can see the shoulders of this thing, and it leans down and looks at her, just looks at her right in the eyes, and it freaked her out. She stumbled backwards. She fell down. She ran to the kitchen. She kept a 9mm pistol in a drawer next to her fridge. She yanks that sucker out. You know, she runs back out there. It's gone. She thinks she's having a mental breakdown, right? She doesn't. She's just like, I need less hours. I'm calling in. She totally dismisses the whole thing, right? This thing looked her in the eye. Her description of it was all black, real black, dark eyes, and expressionless face. No hair around this area, you know, between the nose and above the brow. Said the hair around there kind of looked like a ruff of a parka. You know, just like imagine hair around like a parka, and then, you know, hair around the mouth. She said it was very large because it all happened so quick, and she was so startled by it. She didn't totally get like a detailed long look at this thing because she freaked out and broke out and ran and grabbed her pistol. So she totally dismisses what she just saw. She can't wrap her mind around it, right? So she calls into work and says, look, I think I may, and she, you know, she freely admits she lied to them and said, I may have that vid stuff. I'm not feeling good. They told her, hey, stay at home, you know, just quarantine there. And, you know, if you're not feeling any better by tomorrow, we'll send someone over to test you and yada, yada, you know. She lets it go and goes to her room. Now, she has her pistol with her when she goes into the room. She's so upset that she's literally talking herself into being crazy. She's like, you know, you've lost your mind. You've worked too many hours. I don't mean to laugh, but she was laughing when she expressed it. So forgive me, Susanna. You know, we talked about this. But anyway, so she's like literally convincing herself she's lost her mind. She lays down in bed, and she had blackout curtain and regular curtains in her bedroom, right? So she went over and opened up the blackout curtain because she felt she still had an eerie feeling of being watched, even though she looked around and nothing was watching her, right? But she still had that feeling just at her core. So she lays down and she sets the pistol beside her, and she's just laying there. She puts all her pillows behind her. She's kind of half propped up, and she's staring straight out that window. She turned on her little TV in her room and put on a DVD. I believe it was Waterworld, she said. And she's just listening to this movie, just droning in the background. She ain't even really hearing it. It's just background noise. Then as she's sitting there about to doze off, she hears that tap on the window again, coming from the living room. And she thought, again, she's trying to convince herself she's going crazy. She's like, you're just reliving that mind slip you had earlier. And she hears it again. It just tap, tap, tap. And it's going on at a regular enough cadence that she knows she's not hearing things. So she grabs the pistol and very slowly goes out. She has to go down a short hallway through the kitchen area to turn to her right and look out that window. She said when she looked out that window, it was blacked out again, right? But this is middle of the day, okay? This is not at nighttime or anything. And so she knows she's not bugging. So, like any rational person would, she dials 911, right? She makes a call, says there's a stranger outside of my house. He's big, he's in dark clothing. I don't know what this person wants. I don't feel safe, yada, yada. Troopers on the way. The operator had her stay on the phone. The operator keeps asking, are they moving around? What are they trying to get in? She said, no, they're standing at the window. She's talking for a few minutes, and off in the distance, she hears the siren. And as the siren gets closer, all of a sudden, that dark movement, gone. Just all of a sudden gone. Because of her vantage point, she couldn't see it run, but that dark spot moved out of in front of the window and was just gone. She relays that to the dispatch. Dispatch says, roger that. She's talking on the radio with the troopers as they're coming. A couple moments later, troopers are there. They're going around the house. There was two of them. One went out. They looked around. They came and knocked on the door. She opened the door after she put the gun in the drawer, of course, because she didn't want any kind of crap from the cops about her gun, or not that they could or would, but she just didn't want it. So she opens the door, and they said, what's going on? They talked to her for a couple minutes. She tells them what she saw. She tells them she thought she was losing it earlier when it first happened, and this thing looked at her, right? And immediately, oh, well, ma'am, it's that time of year. Bears are coming out of hibernation. They're moving through and this and that. And she immediately realized they were not listening to her. And that frustrated her because she told them, look, I've been up here most of my life. I know what bears look like. I've had bears come through the yard before. This was different, yada, yada. Irrelevant. They basically, they took note of it. They wrote down what she said, but she didn't feel they were taking her serious, right? So they're gone. She has a real hard time falling asleep that night, but she finally does, just out of sheer exhaustion, because she had just gotten off a long ass shift. Then all this stuff happened. She kind of dozed off and on, but anyway, so she finally falls asleep, and the movie Waterworld's playing on repeat, right? So as she's in dreamland, she's just listening to Waterworld or whatever as she's coming out of her sleep. She says she distinctly remembers hearing that tap. And, I'm telling you. So immediately she's like, shit. Okay, I am going to have to defend myself. I don't know what the hell is going on. Bigfoot, hairy man, Sasquatch, none of that was even in her mind. She didn't know. She wasn't putting anything together because she had no working thoughts in her day-to-day life about Bigfoot. She's a nurse. She's doing her job. She's worried about helping people and stuff, right? So that's the last thing on her mind. She retrieves her pistol from the drawer again and goes around, and there's nothing there, right? It's on in the dark, but it's not fully dark because that time of year, in the spring, it's working towards land of the midnight sun. So we're gaining light. So it wasn't overly dark. It was dusk-like, according to what she said. So she goes to all the windows. Nothing. She comes back in through to the kitchen. She said she was hungry, so she said, all right, I'm going to get something to eat and go back to bed. She does so. She makes herself a quick snack with some leftovers and whatnot. And she said as she was putting together this little meal, she heard a softer tap on a window, but she's in a spot where she can look and see it's not at that big window. So she's like, okay, you're freaking yourself out. Calm down. She starts eating, and she hears it again. And she realizes it's coming from her bedroom. So she stops what she's doing. She grabs her pistol and walks into the bedroom and is pointing the gun. And as she goes into the room and sees this thing, it's in front of her window, and again, it's dark enough outside that it's all silhouette. She can't really make out anything, but then it moves when it sees that she has the gun. She assumes she didn't make eye contact, but when she came in the room with the gun, this thing left. So she's super freaked out. She contemplates calling the troopers again, but with what had happened earlier in the interaction, she didn't feel it was going to go anywhere. So she was like, well, shit, this thing's going to have to literally be breaking in order for something to go down. So she's sitting there trying to think of what to do. And so she calls her neighbor, the one neighbor she knew of in the area that she actually talked to, was roughly half a mile down the road, right? And so she calls this person, relays, hey, there's some weirdness going on here or whatever. And her friend, who's a male, married, kids and everything, he tells her, hey, look, we've been having this weirdness happening as well. Tapping on the windows, knocking on the door, stuff being tossed against the house. I guess they had a small play set for their kids that was chucked at their house and just destroyed against the side of their home. And so they didn't see anything, but it was weirdness. So, you know, they were exchanging stories about the weirdness and whatnot. And she asked, well, what can I do? And they said, stay armed. And this person told her, stay inside. Here, when I'm done, finished doing what I'm doing, I will come my four-wheeler and I will do a couple laps around your place. And, you know, you'll hear me on the four-wheeler. I'll do a couple laps, look around, then I'll stop in and say hi. So, okay, good enough, whatever. Gets off the phone, and she's so upset she can't eat, but she's still real hungry, so she's forcing herself to eat a couple bites. And according to what she said, it was like 10 minutes later she hears her neighbor's four-wheeler. So I come to find out, he was so concerned about her because of the tone in her voice. This person that she's known for a while realized something was off by the tone in her voice. So he, you know, made a speedy, got over there, did a couple rounds, stopped in the back, straight out from her window, and had his headlights into the trees. And then she heard him yell a little bit, and then saw him back up a little bit and then come around to the side and come up the side to the side door, right? So she lets him in. He comes up. He goes, hey, there was eye shine over there in the trees. Tell me again what you saw and what was going on. So she says when it first happened, she laid it all out. It was at this window. It bent down and looked at it. He said it bent down. And she was like, yeah. And she wasn't thinking about overall size. She knew it was big, but she wasn't really realizing how tall this thing was because it's just not in her wheelhouse. You know what I mean? And so he goes, wait, come outside with me and let's look at this, okay? So she goes out there with him, clutching her pistol. They go around the side and they're looking up at this window. Now, the bottom of that window is about 6 foot off the ground. And it's a 4-foot window, 4 foot tall. So this thing had to have been at least 10 foot plus in order to be that tall and to have to lean down to look at her. So she's soaking it in. And as they're doing that, there's a weird chattering going off way off into the woods. She said it was so loud, but at a distance, but it still had a lot of power behind it. And immediately their hair stands up on their arms and they go back inside. He talks to her for a little bit, asks her, do you have a more powerful gun? And she did not. So he was like, I have several. Wait here. You know, I'll be back. He takes off on his wheeler, comes back moments later with a high-powered rifle. Shows her how it operates. She was like, I get how to operate or whatever. And so he said, if don't shoot through your own windows because you'll have to replace them. But if this thing tries to break in, then defend yourself, right? He says, you know, if something happens in the middle of the night, you give me a call. I will come as quick as I can. And just be careful. Whatever you do, be careful. Don't just go outside willy-nilly and whatever. You know, she explained, I already called in sick to work. I'm going to, you know, be here for at least a couple days, you know, until, you know, they send someone over with a strip test or whatever for the vid or whatever. So he leaves. She calms down after a bit because she had someone that's listening, because he's dealing with some weird stuff too. He hadn't seen anything, but, you know, stuff being thrown out his house, tapping on the windows, you know, his wife getting eerie feelings and stuff. They essentially stopped letting their child play outside, day or night. It didn't matter. There was just too much weirdness going on, right? And so she said as she was sitting there, after she calmed down, got a bite to eat, her appetite came back. She went and laid back down, but she pulled down her blackout and made sure the curtains were all closed all throughout the house. There was no curtains, however, over those windows at the door. They were just a mix of frosted glass and regular glass in a strange pattern, right? So, halfway through her sleep, she was woken up again to that tapping. And she was like, shit, you know, so she had the rifle laying next to her and the pistol. So she throws her robe on real quick, grabs the rifle, and goes through the house turning on lights, right? And so she starts yelling, get away from the house, I'll shoot you. The troopers are on their way. You know, she's yelling a bunch of stuff. As she's yelling, she hears that in her bedroom. And so she goes in there and starts yelling. When she's yelling in there, a moment later, at the big window where this all first started. So she calls her neighbor. She said, I'm so sorry. It was like 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. She said, I'm so sorry. It's tapping on the windows again. He said, we're already up. Something was tapping on our windows about a half hour ago. Creepy shit, right? Ugh. He says, let me, you know, make sure everything's lined out here, and I'll come right over. Just be safe. Listen for my wheeler, yada, yada. So a few moments later, sure enough, you know, solid dude, neighbor looking out, you know, he comes through, rides around the building a few times, stops at the side door again, comes inside, and they're talking. And now his whole tune had changed from earlier, because that tapping he had told her about on the phone, they saw it, him and his wife together in their front room window. It was looking in the first time they heard that tapping, right? Creeped the fuck out. He tells her, look, it's a Bigfoot. It's a Sasquatch. I don't know why. I've never believed in that shit. There it is. It was staring right at us. You know, black face, black eyes, hair looked like this, and basically explained the same thing Susanna explained to me. And he goes, once I started shouting and it saw me, it ran off. And I'm assuming it just came over here and started the same shit with you. Harassment, right? And she's like, well, what do we do? He was like, not a fucking clue. So they're talking for a moment, and tap, tap, tap on that big back window that she right in front of her recliner or whatever. And so he goes, all right, hold on, where's the rifle? And it was leaning up against the door. So he grabs the rifle, goes outside, and just fires a round into the air. Now, right after the round is shot, they hear thrashing a moment later off into the trees, right? Crash, crash, crash. All of a sudden, her phone's ringing because dude's wife heard the gunshot. It's like, what's going on? Who's firing? You know, what happened? What happened? You know, freaking out. So they calm everything down. He ends up going back home, and everything goes quiet for, she said, probably about 3 or 4 months, off until fall, right? So this started in the spring during the vid lockdown stuff. And then now that following fall, enough time had passed where mentally she had calmed down from it, and life had gone back to normal, basically, you know, nurse, working hard, everything going on, whatever. Well, she gets home from another long shift, and she just felt very defeated because of the nature of her job and some things happening where she worked, you know, just death and stuff. She was really, really down and mentally hurting, right? So at that point, she had started this little online therapy thing. So she would get on with this person, this therapist or whatever, on a Zoom call, and would just basically get all that stuff out, you know, so it wasn't just turning toxic within her. As she was sitting there on the Zoom call, she hears that tapping again out in the living room, but it wasn't picked up on the call. So she immediately was like, went like, oh shit. Well, this person is watching her and goes, hey, are you okay? And she goes, oh yeah, yeah. I forgot I had something I had to do. Thank you for your time. I'm gonna have to end the session a little early today, but I totally just remembered I got some stuff I got to do. She did not feel comfortable expressing what was going on with the therapist online or whatever. So she ended the call, said thank you or whatever, immediately jumps up and her phone rings. She answers her phone. It's the neighbor. Same dude, but it's his wife. She calls and says, hey, it was just here tapping on my window maybe 20 minutes ago. Be aware it may be coming back over. She goes, it just tapped on my window. She goes, okay, well, so-and-so isn't home right now. And it's just me and the kids. I can't come over or whatever. She's, stay there. I still got the rifle. I got the handgun. We'll just, I'll leave it be. So she ignores the tapping. And she said she sat in her master bedroom bathroom with no windows in that particular bathroom, more towards the interior. She said that she felt safer in there because there was a laundry room between the outside wall and the wall of the bathroom she was in. So she was basically not off to this, outside of the house, but that master bathroom was more towards, at least like 6 feet inward inside the home. So she said she sat there and had the door open so she could hear where the tapping was coming from, because it started off at the big window in the living room, and then her bedroom window, then back to the living room window, and then from there it was going around hitting every window like that. So this goes on for a while, and after it goes quiet for a minute, her phone rings again, and it's the woman and her husband had just gotten home. And after it had been quiet for a minute, she was just stressed out. She didn't want to see this thing again. She didn't want to deal with that stuff. But the neighbor calls, and when it went quiet at her house, moments later, the tapping started over there. So this thing wasn't getting a reaction from her, from Susanna, was getting no reaction, and went back to get a reaction from somewhere else. So that to me is really weird. And like, there's something about, it's almost like they feed on that fear energy. Now, I don't know for sure. That's total speculation, but it seems like when they're not getting the reaction they want of fear or outright panic, at least in this instance, and other ones that I haven't published or made public or anything, but they seem to move on to where they will get that reaction. And so a little while later, everything's real calm. And according to what she said, there was no phone call, no heads up, but the neighbor guy came on foot, and he came stealth-like with a high-powered rifle, because unbeknownst to her, there was harassment going on over at their house, and this thing left, right? When he opened the curtain and was showing his gun, this thing left. So he assumed, okay, it's going to go harass Susanna. I'm going to follow it on foot so it doesn't hear me coming, and I'm going to get this thing, right? That was his plan. So unbeknownst to Susanna, who's sitting there just like, what the hell am I going to do about this? What do we do? Dude comes along, creeping through the woods, and there was a floodlight in front of her garage and one off of that kitchen side. So on two sides of the house, there was some light. There were older floodlights. They were kind of incandescent in color. They were bright, but they weren't super bright. They didn't, go all that far or whatever, right? So it being fall time, it was on in the darkness when this stuff was going on. So dude, brave as shit, man. I tell you, my hat's off to that guy. Knowing something that large is looming around, I guess his give a shit was busted. He didn't give a fuck. He was over it, right? So he comes tromping through the woods, not literally tromping, but he comes stealthily through the woods, down the path, where he had to go to cut through another property between their properties to get to Susanna's and try to cut this thing off. And he said, according to what he told her, as he came into to be able to view, because the floodlights were on in front of the garage, and then on the opposite side of the house where he came through this path on, the four-wheeler path, was the other set of floodlights. But on the back side of the house off to his right, that rear floodlight by the kitchen was casting light, and he could see this thing squatted down in the grass and stuff just outside the tree line, but looking directly at her house. So he goes, okay, I got you, you know. So he lines up a shot, takes a shot at this thing, misses it by a mile. It hit the trees behind it, and this thing was gone. Crash, 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 right? He was like, you know, crap, I missed. Well, the gunshot outside and then this thrashing and whatever scared the shit out of Susanna, because she was totally unaware about it. And so immediately she's like looking out like, what the hell? And all of a sudden there's boom, 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 you know, pounding on her door. And she's like freaking out, you know, because she didn't know what was going on. She's like, who is it? Oh, it's so-and-so, you know, let me in. Lets him in. He was like, I just took a shot at it. I missed. It was banging on our house. It was doing all this stuff. And I followed it because I opened the curtain, showed the gun, explained the whole thing. She was like, I wish you would have called me. You scared the shit out of me, right? So after that incident, he ends up going home a little bit later. And he actually has his wife come pick him up in the vehicle, because now that, you know, he had popped a shot and this thing ran off, he didn't want to be going back in the total darkness, because he didn't bring a flashlight or anything. He just kind of broke out on the four-wheeler trail, you know. Wife come gets him, they leave. And according to what Susanna said, everything literally stopped for about almost 2 years. Like, she was... Every time she went outside, she had like PTSD from it. She was scared to go outside. She tried to live life normally. And then after a while, things calmed down. And she said when it was roughly 2 years had passed, and it was like on her mind every once in a while, but rarely, because it had been so long since anything happened, she figured it was a dead issue, you know? Well, just this last fall, just a couple months ago, towards the end of August, she had just got inside. Like, just got inside from work. She had a real late shift. It was approximately almost midnight when she walked indoors, so it was already pretty dark outside. And as soon as she gets in the door and shuts it, she hears a tapping again. The tapping, though, was coming from 3 feet beside her at that door. She sees through the glass this arm over the side tapping that window from just outside of view. Ugh, fuck that, man. She freaks out, of course. Makes a call to the neighbors. They had just recently, a day or two before, had some weirdness going on. No tapping on the windows, but just some weirdness. So that was the last instance that anything has happened. But she said that it was so surreal to see such a large hand and arm come around, and just to see maybe part of the forearm. She said the hand looked to be, you know, about 16 inches in diameter if you were to, you know, size it. Because that window, that glass window with the frosted glass in it, you know, she said that window was 18 inches wide and 32 inches tall, right? Pretty good size window. I mean, it wasn't overly wide, but just how massive the hand was. She said there was very little, if that thing was to place its hand flat against the glass with its palm at one side and the fingertips on the other, there would be very little room on the other side. She said it was a massive hand. And that was the last thing that had happened since. It recently snowed down there a little while ago, and she saw some weird tracks, and I asked, you know, were they in a line? Were they offset? She said they were in a straight line, and it came from one part of the tree line over towards her window and then back away from her window, so it was kind of V-shaped. She said they were directly in line. She said she had taken pictures of it, and I asked her if she would share. Please do. She said she would think about it. We'll see what comes of that, because I don't pressure people. If they got stuff they want to share, share it. If not, hey, I get it, whatever. She wanted to go and take pictures of it in daylight, but the wind blew and some other stuff, and there was kind of a freeze melt thing, so it kind of just obliterated any actual sign of anything outside of just depressions in the snow. So, you know, it is what it is. I want to thank Susanna for sharing. Been invited to come down and take a look next time that something happens. God forbid it does. She reached out to her neighbor, asked him if he would share. He said he would think about it. And I said, well, you know, this is just public safety. So people know crazy shit happens up here. All around the world, if you guys just look a little bit, there is crazy shit happening everywhere. Just saying. I'll leave it at that. But I want to thank Susanna for sharing. It was hard for her in a couple of spots. There's some things omitted, and it'll stay that way by request. But very disturbing stuff. Feeling stalked, feeling followed. She said the scariest thing was she just came up those side stairs and went in her house. Just mere seconds, it seemed like, later. So this thing was close enough to have watched her go in her house, and that freaks her out. She has upgraded her pistol to a much larger caliber and carries it everywhere. Muggers beware. Susanna ain't playing. She will pop you. I want to thank her again, and I'm going to thank you guys for joining me, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thank you.